Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of PT Outcast. I'm here with Carly, and we're getting set to deliver to you the last of our 3 series of podcasts with Elise Ruckert and Libby Krauss from Trellis Ed. And in this one, Carly, we dug into, it seems like almost everything. Um,
By the
so,
end, yep.
yeah, I think so. We started, just as a recap, if you have forgotten or you hadn't seen the other ones, the first one was about like professional development. The second one was really a lot about how professional development for faculty and educators. And the second one was about essentially belonging and, how distance faculty can feel that and what the differences are there. And then in the middle of these episodes that we had with them, we had this, great conversation with Kendra Gagnon and Mary Blackington about abundance and scarcity. And by the time we got to this third episode, we were all ready to just like dig into all of the challenges that we see, like what are the threats to our future in physical therapy education. And so we dug in, and it was cool.
Yeah, it was. And I think we hit on multiple levels here. So one, from a systemic level, how do we make sure that students are still able to access our program? We touched a little bit on, some of the issues with, funding currently. For example, we also talked about getting high quality faculty and the 50% rule and what we think about that, so we kind of dove in there. We went all over the place, but still, I think we're able to, you know, have to cut off the conversation like usual with our friends at Trellis because there's just so much that we share and so much that we have to say.
Yeah, I really got a little bit heated about the 50% rule, and I'll stand by it. And there's some research papers that we share. We'll put in the show
Mhm.
notes so people can dig into that. I think we talked about accelerated programs and curricula and some of the opportunities there and some of the challenges there.
Yeah.
So we hit a lot of philosophical points, but hopefully at the end we like took the ranting and turned it into constructive comments, um, which I think we did. I think we did, but I'll be interested in the audience. Like, do you think we did? I don't know. Like,
We'll let you be the judge, but I think
yeah,
we did too, Eric. I think we wrapped it up really nicely. And I know you said our last in the series, but I'm going to say with an ellipses, ... for now, because I don't think we can I don't think we can not bring our friends from Trellis back.
yeah. As a matter of fact, I wrote to Elise an email this morning and said more of those would be welcome. So yeah, they're good fun. Who knows? Maybe we're just transitioning to a little echo chamber of the 4 of us, but I don't know. It'll be good. It's fun anyway. So I hope everybody else has as much fun as we did and enjoyed the episode.
Yeah. Thanks, folks.
Hey everybody, welcome back to PT Outcast. This is another collaboration episode. So I'm Eric Robertson. I'm here with Carly Lochala, and we have Elise Ruckert and Libby Krauss from Trellis Ed. And we're really pleased to be doing our third of this series. So it's been a lot of fun so far. And every time we get talking, it just feels like we can't stop. So thanks everybody for coming back for another one of these.
Thanks so much, Eric and Carly, for having us back.
Yeah. So, you know, I guess I just want to set the stage here for this third conversation. And to set that stage, I guess the theme that I'm thinking of throughout a lot of the discussions in this season of PT Outcast has to do with the future is not guaranteed, right? The decisions you make, the work people do right now helps define the future, right? And so, we've had some episodes where we looked at like some challenges to funding with student loans. We've talked about faculty development and how we have some challenges there. And we've mentioned like this evolution of hybrid education and it's growing. We've talked about sort of the scarcity mindset versus abundance and sort of the reliance on scarcity. And maybe that's going to set us up into a really challenging position. And so as I'm thinking about all these things, it really starts to feel like we're in a bit of a moment in DPT education, right? We're at a crux point. We're feeling stresses. We've had some really major changes over the last 10 years with hybrid education programs developing. There's probably almost 40 of them now, but 40 is a small number compared to the total number of DPT programs, but the hybrid programs are really big. And so it's almost 20% of graduates are coming from hybrid programs. So there's a lot to talk about. There's a lot going on. And I think that's what I'd like to have a conversation about is like, what's in our heads as educators, as leaders in the profession, as people who are really invested into wanting the future to be excellent and to be somewhere better than we are now. It's my honor really to host you for this conversation. So, um, we can kick it off wherever we want to. If anybody has any like things that they're dying for. I know Libby always has lots of opinions, but sometimes you have to like knock on her door, get in there, and then talk a little bit, and then the opinions will come forth. So, um, I think for me, it seems like a logical place to start would be like the biggest change that I've seen in education has been the hybrid program development and how that goes. And in my mind, there's a couple things. One, not all hybrid programs are built the same. Two, we sort of need to make sure the outcomes are as good as the residential program outcomes. And then are those residential programs outcomes still the same where they were? Like it's everything, a lot of changing. So let's start with this change and this evolution, this maturation process of hybrid education. So, Elise, what are your thoughts there? I can see you kind of getting geared up here.
Yeah. So as I think about this, I'm really um contemplating the role of the accelerated curricular model,
Hmm.
which a lot of the newer hybrid model, a lot of, not all, but a lot of the newer hybrid programs have adopted. And really am thinking about how that is preparing our competent graduates, coming from a really 3-year kind of traditional curricular model, both in residential and hybrid curricular background for myself. I'm just skeptical about how this 2-year process can work, and I'm worried about the complexity of the healthcare system. I'm worried about the level of clinical reasoning that our students need. And I'm just wondering how we cram it all in 2 years, when what I'm seeing in 3-year curriculum is that students are struggling in a 3-year curriculum to make it all happen. So any thoughts from the group on that?
Yeah, I mean, I love that, Elise. And it's something I've kind of wrestled with a little bit. Like, this is what I fall asleep thinking about apparently. But just thinking about, you see that shift a little bit in the medical model too. Right now, there are some 3-year med schools, but the difference is like residency is required, right? Whereas in PT, residency is not required. And residency from a medical model in medical school, that's really where someone is getting their advanced hands-on training and still really learning. But residency is optional in PT. And so I feel like sometimes we follow the medical model, but we didn't follow it all the way through, right? We don't have mandatory residencies. And so maybe we are missing out on part of that training a little bit. So that's like kind of one thought I was having about the accelerated model. And I would want to know what are they missing out on, right? What's being cut? Because I know I can speak from what our program looks, or the program where we all met at USC, what that program looked like and what's in it. And so then what isn't going to be in it in an accelerated program? Something has to be cut and left on the floor of the drawing room here. And when you think about if there's also this push of expanding the role of the physical therapist as really a leader in primary care, I'm having a hard time seeing how both of those things can be true at the same time. How we're educating people in 2 years and then expecting a higher level of uh, practicing at the highest level of our degree. So that's kind of what comes to mind for me when we think about um, these things.
Think it's interesting because we've talked about these things as a group offline, and I feel like a lot of our individual sort of soapboxes or concerns all sort of come together here. So my thought is, comparing it to a med school program, is that we don't get paid what physicians get paid, right? So I understand the idea of trying to consolidate it, make it less expensive, make it take less of your career time, right? And I understand the idea of not making a residency required, because you need to start making money to pay off your loans. And I think, yeah, we move towards this sort of the doctorate and the primary care model, with this goal, I think, to increase sort of the prestige of what we do, but the salary model did not come along with us. And so I find it really hard to I wouldn't I would find it hard to push this residency model, for example, knowing that they're not going to get paid enough to make up that time or to pay for the 3 years of PT school they just did.
I would say that our residency model in physical therapy is completely broken, right? We've had it for the one model for a long time, and still less than 10% of PT graduates are able to do a residency or want to do a residency. Or sometimes they start and then they stop because they realize how horrible it is because they're working so much, they're getting paid so little. And so it's broken, it's this big, expensive year-long thing. And I'm worried about it. I'm also worried about the fact that they're combining ABPTRFE with CAPTE. I can understand that from a organizational level at APTA where, okay, this is kind of the same work, let's pull it together. But to me, that puts these residency programs, or sometimes live in small clinics, under the same lens as big institutions. And so are the decision-making processes going to fit those small clinics if it's more of a CAPTE influence? And that would be my guess. Would it be more CAPTE influence? Even if they don't attend it, just CAPTE is more mature. It's more, there's more brain power in CAPTE, just from like an organizational mass, not from an individual brain power or anything like that, but just like an organizational inertia. So that's one of the concerns I have about that residency thing. I think it might just be broken and needs a remix.
Yeah, and am I the only one here that didn't do a residency?
I also did not do a residency. I did a fellowship, but I did not do a residency.
I see. Yeah, I wanted to do a residency, but I was way too burned out after PT school, so I was like, I'm going to take a year. And I remember talking to one of my mentors at USC, saying, I'm going to take a year, figure out if I want to do like the ortho residency or the neuro residency, and then I'll be back. And he was like, no, you will not. And yeah, he was right. I mean, right, I got a job. The idea of cutting my paycheck in half didn't really make sense. I was getting mentorship where I was getting the teaching opportunities that I wanted, and it didn't make sense, even though I was very interested. I was going to do back-to-back ortho neuro residencies. And then I was like, nah, never mind.
Yeah, well, so yeah, that's a tragedy a little bit, right? Because here's this engaged person wants to keep learning, but there's no real way to make that happen unless you're like real able and willing to sacrifice. So then you come back to this scarcity model, so the way we have residency set up is like way more scarce than the way we have DPT education set up, which is a little scarce.
Yeah.
And then to come back to the hybrid model too, I think in my experience, just in general, the population of students going into the hybrid model at USC are on average older, potentially second career. And that's like even more barrier to, I don't want to spend another year after this doing something that's not going to give me, one, the money, or two, the like work-life balance that I'm looking for at this time in my life.
Yeah. So, I want to go back to something Carly asked, kind of, I guess, rhetorically, but she said, what do you take out of the curriculum to make it a more accelerated curriculum? And I guess I want to tell a little story. Because I think when you look at a curriculum, like a really established, high performing curriculum, like the USC curriculum, and you say, what do we cut out? Well, that's really hard, if not impossible to do in my mind, because everything is so linked and integrated and built on each other. Right. And it's like a living entity, the curriculum of an institution. So to cut it just feels awful. Right. I've been on the other side where, I was in a room one time where it was myself, John Childs, Tim Flynn, and Rob Weiner. And it was in Schertz, Texas, in this little, I don't even know where, like, office building. And that was when they were trying to make the curriculum for South College. And so we sat down, we put like a spreadsheet up on the board, and we said, okay, what do we really need in PT school? And the four of us just threw stuff up on the board and debated with each other, like, do you really need this? Like, do you really need that? And it was not hard to come up with the right amount of stuff starting from scratch, right? Because you reconfigure how things are built. So I don't think that all by itself an accelerated curriculum is necessarily bad, but I do think there's really valid points about, how long do people have to process information? What's the feeling of what it's like in an accelerated curriculum, not just for students, but for faculty, right? So I think there's validity to not 3 years of a DPT school with the cost, and maybe it is too long, but you can't just really quickly throw something together, because the smaller it gets, the better it needs to be, right? And the better the people need to be. So there's some balancing points there for me.
Yeah.
I've been thinking just so much about cognitive load as we have watched our two pathways at USC, and like the differences in the structure. And there's just so few breaks in the hybrid calendar specifically that I just have come to realize, gosh, in whatever curriculum is ideal in the world, having some really focused time for breaks just feels critical as you're delivering this. And I appreciate that comment, Eric, about, hey, we're not just talking about the students though, we're also talking about the faculty also need a break. And I'm going to bring it back to our conversation 2 podcasts ago about belonging. The faculty in my belonging study for my dissertation that were in an accelerated model said, hey, I can't worry about belonging, because when I finish the first course I'm teaching on Friday, I'm starting up on the next class I'm teaching on Monday. So my survival mode is on curriculum delivery, and it's not about like me and my wellness and my connection within the organization. And so it's just very interesting that when we think about the potential costs of a certain curricular model, we're not just talking about the curriculum that's coming out, right, or the content that's changing, but we're also thinking about the overall time that we're giving learners and faculty and staff who are supporting the engine of the program, right, to be able to show up and do their best work. And how do we do that? I don't know. I don't know.
I'm glad you just mentioned that, Elise, because I had not for one second thought about the faculty experience yet in a 2-year model. And yeah, that would be hard where you're just like, because I do really appreciate when there's a little bit of breathing space in between courses and at the end of a semester when I'm like, okay, let me reflect back and think of what went well over the semester. What might I want to change? That's when you kind of check your notes and see and kind of plan for that particular course, but you might not have that luxury, right? It requires you to be much more, I would assume, kind of on it throughout the semester, keeping track of that stuff. Yeah, fascinating.
And I just keep thinking about this whole XPT, excellence and innovation in education framework, and how our goal is creating master adaptive learners, right? Who are able to engage in this deep learning and adjusting, and that are able to tolerate ambiguity, and they need feedback for that. And for us as educators to be able to provide this kind of unique and tailored or not unique, but individualized feedback, it just takes so much. And so it just feels like we're having these pulls of what is now being, that we know from the literature and from this amazing study that was done. Hey, this is what excellence in PT education can look like, and we're just trying to keep up and think about how to do that, and it's hard.
So I'm going to talk from my perspective as the oldest person in the room, and which I never ever like to admit. Like, I usually like to play like, no way, I'm way younger than everybody, but okay. And I'm only oldest, not by age, not chronologically, but the fact that I have a bachelor's degree in physical therapy.
Hmm.
Okay. So I was old enough, and I went to a school that had not yet transitioned to DPT. And so I graduated in January of 1999 from Quinnipiac University with a bachelor's of physical therapy. Okay, so I was like, I was 21 and I was a PT. And my PT education, undergrad, the way it was structured then, first year, no PT classes, just like chemistry and bio and all those things. Second year, we had one clinical arts class where we would, for 2 hours twice a week, learn how to do muscle testing, learn about crutches and gait training and those kind of things. So some of the very basic foundational like handling skills. And then third year and fourth year were just like, give it everything, right? Full bore PT, right? The regular college stopped. You had no more regular college after that. And so my program was 2 years and 1 semester. And I was 18 to 20 when I was doing it. So I also have this cognitive dissonance of, you know, how come I could do that? And we all did that back then. But we feel like we can't do it now. Right? Because we're starting with people who already have degrees. Theoretically, it should go faster. But it's different time. They're different people. Yeah, except, yes, go.
Except for, I was going to say, direct access, for example, that wasn't a thing, and now it is a thing. I think there have been layers of information that have been added to the requirements of what being a PT really constitutes, I think, which is like, but again, I'm not necessarily advocating for 3 years. I don't know if it makes up exactly an extra year of content, but I think there have been some new things that have kind of forced us to evolve as a profession and in the educational space to make sure that we're preparing people to be entry level, in quotes, right? Whatever entry level is.
I do think I agree with everything Kali is saying. And I think there is also an element of sort of an elitist mindset of like, we have doctorates because we're amazing and we should be recognized for being amazing. When, you know, one, like the best example for me is like every PTA I've ever worked with basically is just amazing.
Yeah.
Right. And I would send my family to them, be like, skip the doctor, just go to this PTA. Right. And so I have some internal dilemma around the idea that the didactic piece is the thing that makes us good, and how much of what we do we learn in the clinic.
Right. You know, and that's a real thing. And I guess the thing that I always think about with PT education, if we're really into mixing up and talking about what's PT education, here's what I think. We were having some babbling before this podcast started recording, and we were talking about how much work it takes to create a didactic course and all the nuances and all the fine tuning of the lectures and the content and the words that you say, right? And you, like, as faculty, we obsess over what goes into our lecture time and our class activities. And then we're like, okay, good, see you at clinic. And there's like no control at all in most clinic systems, right? Not everybody's the same. There's a spectrum. But I remember my own PT education clinic. It was like luck of the draw, right? And I think it still is that way for a lot of people. So, you know, if there's a spot that you could put a lot of energy into like PT education, it would not only be shortening programs and finding ways to make the didactic more efficient, but it would also be finding ways to improve the rigor or the consistency or the product of the clinical education.
Yeah. Interesting. I like the other thing I'm thinking about, and I haven't stopped thinking about this since we chatted with Mary and Kendra, but thinking about like, why don't we follow more like the nursing model where everyone gets their PTA, right? In the process of learning, like, why don't we follow? Because like with nursing, right? In the nursing model, a lot of people will be able to be a CNA or like certified nursing assistant as they're going through their training. And then there's so many different directions to go in nursing, but we don't follow that model. And a PTA is going to have to go through the exact same process to go to PT school. Right. But I wonder if something like that makes a lot of sense, like to address some of the issues that we're seeing, where like maybe it's stepping stones, right? And like benchmarks rather than just this one path to get to the DPT. And especially, I've been ruminating a lot about this with the, at this point, I think a lot of people know about what's happening in the change with the Grad Plus loans. We've talked about it, and like with Grad Plus loans going away and PT no longer being categorized as a professional degree. At first I was outraged. I was like, what do you mean? This is crazy. I spent forever going to, but then I'm like, I don't want people to have to take out $200,000 of loans. Like maybe this is actually not that bad because that's, the ROI is not that great. And I know there are things beyond just money that you're getting, right? A lot of us do not go into PT for money. But, knowing what I know now, it was a huge investment to take on those loans. And so thinking about and being creative about other pathways to PT so that people can make a little more money along the way. So anyway, rant over, but that's kind of what's been in my mind as of late.
Yeah, and there was just a study published a few months ago about career regret and the number of PTs that have career regret because of the financial tie. I mean, and other things. But gosh, we don't want a workforce filled with people who regret their career decision.
And wasn't
How
that
can
number
we
almost
fix this?
40%? It was almost
It was
40%.
huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was
It was
huge. Yeah.
over 30%. Yeah, I couldn't remember, but yeah, it's wild.
So, it's kind of funny. I sometimes prepare for our podcasts by asking AI to have some conversations with me. I'm like, try to like approach the intelligence of this room and pre-season me with some things so that I'm ready. And this time I asked it, I told AI about the topic that we were talking about, and it said some things that I kind of felt like I was getting kicked a little bit. So one of the quotes here that AI said it said, is the rigid 3-year residential DPT model actually the biggest barrier to the diversity we claim to want in the profession?
Wow.
I was like, yeah, AI bringing it today. So when you take into account like something like Carly said, like give people earning potential earlier, right? Like get a PTA degree as a standard part of PT education, get you into clinic, start earning. Not only can you earn money, but think of how that funds clinical education. Because when I go to PT clinic right now as a student, I can't bill Medicare, right? But if I'm PTA, suddenly I can. Clinic is suddenly incentivized to take students, right? So this helps on multiple levels.
Yeah, it makes me think of so my brother went to pharmacy school at Northeastern and he did a combined grad undergrad program. So 6 years and then he comes out with his PharmD. And so like you're doing and then there's like a little bit of overlap toward the end of I think the second year and third year. And then they are doing some like clinical practicum work kind of alongside. So it's like what an interesting model, right? To have something where maybe you are still in PT school, but maybe one day a week you are working in clinic as a PTA, for example, like, and you're continuing to work and build those hands-on clinical skills. And then you're learning new content. So yeah, anyway, just a thought of like something to do. And I know we've talked a little bit, Eric, with Joe Gadges was talking about the idea of doing something like that where it's for PT combined, like USC, for example, we're talking about different strategies and things. And so combine grad and undergrad. The challenge is then you have to kind of know a little sooner in your journey what you might want to do with your career, right? To have interest in applying to something like that. But anyway, yeah. Interesting.
And what a pedagogical advantage also that you could be learning things and didactically, right? And turning around immediately and using it, and then turning around immediately and using that experience and bringing it to the classroom. I think that would be an amazing, just a very good model. And another thing that comes to
When
mind
I
for me,
was in, sorry, go ahead, continue. Yeah.
I was just going to say another thing that comes to mind for me is that I had a student, this idea of someone brought up the concept of transfer credits, like leaving one PT program and using transfer credits to go to another PT program. And I thought, is that even a thing? And it might be a thing somewhere, but it's not a thing that happens often or that I hear of. And so I think that adds to the rigidity, right? Like, you are in it for 3 years or you're out and you have to start again from the beginning. Like, that's the only way we do this.
Yeah. So sorry to cut you off there. I had a couple a couple thoughts that came up. Like, so one of the things you're talking about, the clinic while they were learning, right? When I taught at Texas State University, during the time that we had the students in orthopedics, they went through rotations in the faculty practice. And so you could see the students that were currently in those rotations coming up to you after class with all these like really in-depth connected questions. And it was wonderful because the faculty at the practice knew what the students learned precisely, right? And so they were really able to mentor them really nicely in that clinical practice. And you could see each one would just like, boom, accelerate instantly with that clinical connection. You know, that was not just a random clinical connection. It was a really scripted, you know, very aware connection that happens. And it's one of the reasons I think, like in that excellence papers, you know, that faculty practice is one of the things that came up, but not just faculty practice, how you integrate it. So
That's even without having a faculty practice. I went to NYU for PT school, and when I was in school, we had what we called observations. So once a week for 4 hours, every week you had something. You were in a clinic for maybe 6 or 8 weeks, and the type of clinic, the theme, I guess, was related to what you were learning in that year or that semester. So, you know, I spent time doing one-on-one cardiac rehab for 8 weeks, and it did, like, you, depending on the clinic, sometimes you got to do a lot more hands-on stuff, especially if you had someone who had gone to the NYU program. They would mentor you quite heavily, and that's where I like learned my love of vestibular, because I was in a exclusively vestibular clinic for 6 weeks. And so I think there's a lot of power into that type of thing, but like, how does that fit into a program? Can you still do that in an accelerated program? I don't know, you know, and it's just like, I want a map of all the programs. That's what I want. I want to look and I want to see what's included in all of them and where are the commonalities here, right? And then where's the overlap, and what are the things that like some schools are getting that others aren't, even with the 3-year programs. I want to see all that and like kind of have a sense. So if someone wants to make that for me, that would be great.
Yeah.
Erica, as a nod to you, go ahead, take a look at that.
that's great. That's
I
great.
was just going to say, yeah, I'll add to that if we're, you know, waving magic wands. I'll add to that. I want a map of all the clinics and what students they're taking, because the first thing that comes to mind, Carly, as you talk about that experience at NYU, is how Southern California has so many programs, so densely packed, that the idea of every student in Southern California spending 4 hours shadowing somewhere, like, that's just not going to happen. So such a amazing experience that, but there's this yet another barrier for some programs.
So another quote that the AI brought was about the elitism of the cost of PT school, right? Like, are we moving it towards a luxury degree product? Because the salaries aren't increasing, the costs are increasing. There's a good amount of programs that are going to be, you know, beyond the sort of this nice ratio where like maybe the program should cost about 1 year of your salary, and after that you lose economic power, right? So a lot of programs are past that. This could get even more complicated with the limits in the Grad Plus loans. And so you might, you know, think of this in a way where only very well-off people can go get a PT education because nobody else can afford to do it.
Well, especially when you're thinking about, maybe I'm thinking about public versus private sector, right? And so I think this is where perhaps public higher education systems are playing a really important role in still making the DPT degree accessible and affordable, where many private institutions can't compete with tuition at that, lower level in general. And so what is that balance between having both public and private universities offering the degree? It's just an interesting thought.
I have another scarcity thought that I've been thinking of. So, one of the critiques on hybrid programs that have been growing is that their first time NPTE pass rates are not good, right? They're in the 60s or maybe even 50%. Now, again, not all. Some are in the 80s, right? Some are doing okay. But Elise, I'm just gonna call you out for a second, right? So when I said that, you kind of cringed, right? Why? Why did you cringe? Because if you look at their ultimate pass rates, that's pretty close to residential.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the cost, and I'm not only thinking the financial cost of paying for the exam multiple times, but I'm also really thinking about the emotional cost and thinking about, these students who are, thinking that they're putting all effort in and they're ready to go, they're going to be able to go practice, and then dealing with the heartbreak associated with delaying that ability to practice. And also just knowing that our learners are coming in with a lot more stresses these days, right? The world is a really stressful place. And I think it's always been stressful, but now there's much more heightened awareness to all the stresses that everyone is dealing with. And so just just putting that into context of everything learners are having to manage, and then to think that you might only be 50 or 60% successful, that was part of my cringe. And then my other cringe is, why the heck is it so different from residential? What are
Yeah.
we
What's
missing?
happening? What's
What
happening?
are we missing with our hybrid learners that is not preparing them? Is it the curriculum? Is it something about the belonging in the virtual space? What is it? Because we've all said hybrid pedagogically can be so beautifully sound. People can control what time they're logging in and how much they're listening to, and they can immediately quiz themselves. Like, right, we could go down and down and down the rabbit hole of why it's so awesome and so great. Then why aren't we producing the outcomes? That's my cringe. Why?
Oh, I love the passion, the pedagogically beautifully sound. Wow. She's
I'm gonna make
Part
some
of
shots.
me, oh yeah, go. Oh, I love that. Yeah, please send me one, Libby. The thinking about that, I almost wonder, like, thinking about what it would be like because I hybrid programs didn't exist when I was in PT school, right? That wasn't a thing yet, so I can't speak to what it's like to actually do that. But sometimes I wonder, is it like decision fatigue, right? What is it? Because there's so much, self-paced and self-motivation that's required to be successful in a degree program like that. And I almost wonder if it's just like it's hard to keep the pressure and the gas pedal down consistently for a very long time and then take it all the way through to the end, right? Because if you are been kind of learning on your own a lot, I don't know, that's one thought I'm having. But yeah, but it is interesting, right? Because a lot of the hybrid sort of models will have that flipped classroom model where students can watch and rewatch and pause and go back and like really make sure they're understanding a lecture in a way that you can't necessarily do in the residential setting, especially when it's more of a traditional model where it's like lecture and then you go home and you study your notes. So yeah, it's fascinating. I don't know.
yeah. So, again, I'm with the AI quotes, right? This is the last of the AI quotes that really got me.
Hit
Was it?
us, Eric. Let's
Yeah.
go.
So it said, is first time pass rates just like, like a beauty pageant for programs where they just really want to, it's like this luxury statistic. First time pass rate doesn't really matter. That's what AI asked. And I thought that was an interesting question, which gets me back to my scarcity point. Okay. The scarcity point that I want to make here, talking about first time pass rates, is how often the NPTE is offered.
Mm.
When I graduated, you could take that thing whenever you wanted. And it was like that for a long time until there was like a test integrity scandal. Something happened. I'm not really sure what happened. And then suddenly it switched to like very specific dates and it stayed there. So now if you don't pass it, you have to wait a really long time to take it again. which is scarcity, which increases the emotional toll of the test, right? If I know I could go sit for that test in another month, I'm good. I'm like, whatever, I'll take it again. I can really hammer in a month. But in 5 months or 6 months, I'm going to start to forget PT school. So what are we doing there? That's another thing where our magic wand magic, that would be a magic wand I would wave to go back to that other thing.
Model. Yeah, that's a great point. It's like not really allowing students to take the test when they're ready, right? It's like you take it, this is the day, you have to be ready by that time. And especially for some of our learners that are coming from maybe a non-traditional background in the way that like it's a second career or they have kids or whatever. There's other life stuff that's happening that they have to somehow fit in and be able to study for this exam. And again, I was very lucky. I, didn't have to do any of that. I was able to devote like 10 weeks, 10 weeks where all I did was study for the NPT, right? And not everyone can do that. I didn't work. I just studied. I went to the library every day. And that's again because I was very lucky to be able to do that. And that just is not going to work for all of the learners out there. So I don't know. We got to fix it. I think we can come up with some good ideas by the end. We've already come up with some great ideas, I think, in this in this podcast. So hopefully we can solve it by the end.
We're going to definitely have to feed the transcript of this to AI and be like, come up with an action plan. Like we've developed like, there's a famous thing that happened in PT. It was like 1995, the research agenda. And it was like the first time PT leaders came together and said like, we should do really good clinical research. And they kind of coalesced around like a specific agenda for research and improving that. And maybe that's where we are. Maybe we need like, a really lean, really like powerful, like energy moment of like, what's the 2025 education agenda? And I know a few years ago there was like some efforts and this and that, but I didn't really feel the products from that. It didn't really shift anything. I feel like we're talking about some big things that have to happen and we might not have the luxury to have them happen on a slow pace.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So I have another thing to wave my wand about, but I don't want to keep bringing up all the topics in case anybody else has some topics. I'm happy to defer to other thoughts here and then bring mine up later.
Well, I just think just to kind of wrap up some of the things that you're talking about, I just feel like there has to be some changes on a faster scale, like you were just mentioning, in the way that like, okay, if students currently have $100,000 cap, they're absolutely going to want to go to like programs that are less expensive and shorter, right? The less money that I have to pay to get through this program. And I think we might see, maybe more fewer PTs, like fewer people entering DPT programs. But those that do, maybe they're going to be going toward a hybrid model or an accelerated model where they can be done sooner, or they can find one that's in the United States that's hybrid that maybe fits their fee structure a little, but what they can afford a little bit better. So I do think it's going to be interesting to see how things shift. And I think thinking about the rankings, right? The US News World and Reports, I do feel like it's a bit of a popularity contest in terms of like who has the lowest tuition, first time pass rates, all that stuff. But there are things that students should pay attention to, right? And they should think about when they're kind of looking at that. And like probably what's a better metric is look, who are the people that are there? What are they doing? And kind of looking and exploring a little bit more that way rather than going on the rankings alone, because I think that's how you can end up spending a lot of money for something that you can probably get for a much lower cost somewhere else. So that's what I'll say.
I like it.
Yeah, and I'm also just thinking about all the new programs that are starting, right? And we've talked about this and it's been highlighted as like storm clouds on the horizon, right? There was a paper by Dusinger and colleagues a number of years ago. And yes, there certainly is a concern with this growing number of programs. And it also gives the potential for innovation and for different models and newer models, right? That maybe aren't, as you were saying, Eric, they aren't requiring this retrofit that
Mhm.
existing programs have, where it's really hard to remanufacture and to make broad changes in a program that's been around since the 1940s or the 1950s, right? So I do think that it's important within our national kind of conversation and dialogues that we are understanding that yes, there can be concerns around this, but also we need to look at the positives of like, wow, how might these newer programs really help get us to meeting the needs of students and addressing the confines of the current context of physical therapy education?
Yeah, the current context, which
Yeah,
is a good segue into my next wand waving moment.
go for it. I'm
Yeah.
ready.
So if I wanted to wave a wand again, I would point it at the CAPTE 50% rule. And what I mean by that is that CAPTE currently requires programs to have 50% of their faculty have a PhD degree. And there's a small exception, which is if 10% are currently undergoing in the process of obtaining a terminal degree, then that's okay to be at 40% for the time it takes for them to finish. But, that's like, why is the DPT not a terminal degree? Right? I have a Master of Fine Arts degree. That is a terminal degree in art. I'm technically more qualified as an art teacher than I am as a DPT teacher, which is nonsense because I'm not qualified at all as an art teacher, right? Like I'm somewhat qualified. I can do it a little, right? I've done a little education at university level there, but like I'm like a baby there, but I have a terminal degree in art with a Master of Fine Arts. But my DPT degree doesn't count. And that's offensive. And it's
Yeah.
not just offensive to me, it's also offensive in a recent paper. Andrew Hogan from Creighton University, he wrote a paper that was titled, it's a great title, Credentialism and Barriers to Entry, a Historical and Sociological Analysis of the CAPTE 50% Requirement for Physical Therapy Faculty with Academic Doctorates. Okay, that's a mouthful. Great title. Beautifully pedagogically sound title. At the end of the abstract, there's this quote. The author demonstrates that justifications for the 50% rule were rooted in professional biases and misleading evidence, and suggests that this mandate is poorly suited to present academic trends. Importantly, the 50% rule is a significant barrier to entry for all aspiring faculty and an insurmountable one for those from less elite backgrounds. And that was published this year in the Journal of Physical Therapy Education.
Thank you for reminding me of that. I saw that title and I forgot to go back and read it.
It's a good one. It's juicy.
And
Yeah.
the one thing I've been thinking about related to this, Eric, is the residencies that you can do in education in PT, right? Because won't those qualify as the 50% if someone's gone through those new residency programs for teaching specifically?
Do not think so.
The faculty residency. I feel like I saw a post about this, about talking about the Duke residency, how that's going to be something.
You're right. It's going to be a change. It's going to be a new change.
And
yeah.
like that to me, I'm like, okay, if you can change that, then I know so many incredibly gifted educators who are not going to uproot their lives to go through a residency program that could very easily demonstrate expertise and knowledge beyond what's covered in that faculty residency program. So to me, I'm like, you're just making a way to make money with these things. It irritates me because I'm like thinking about some of the people in our program at USC that I'm like, you're an amazing educator. You should count. You should be, even though you don't have a terminal degree that's an EDD or a PhD, amazing educator in this program. And you should be able to demonstrate your content knowledge in a way that allows you to become part of that 50% that isn't requiring you to do a faculty residency, which again, I think are good things to train faculty. But I do think there should be a pathway for those faculty who are really, really, really talented and skilled that doesn't require them to do a faculty residency.
How about the pathway is let's just eliminate that rule.
Yeah.
Like get rid of it. Like, why is it there? Right. Like, so, I encourage everybody to read Dr. Hogan's paper and, maybe we can get him on the podcast. I'm not sure. I don't know him, but maybe we can find a connection. But, if it's rooted in professional biases and misleading data, that's a problem, right? That's a problem to fix. And some of the things that he cites in there are the idea that only PhD people do research, right? That's not true. There's another thing, about this old idea that you should have a higher degree than the people you're teaching, and it's like, well, okay, let's look again where we decided to depart from the medical model. MD is fine. You could be a dean of a medical school. You could be the program director. You could be whatever you want in medicine with an MD. Why do we cut our own feet out from under us and say the DPT is not a terminal degree? Why do you take people who have already consumed 3 years of graduate education and say, you got to go more? You got to go more if you want to teach to make less than you would make in the clinic.
And it means that all our content experts, our actual clinicians who are currently in the clinic, have the up-to-date experience. They are essentially of less value.
Yes.
And therefore first to go when things have to be tightened up financially in a department. And so it just it means we're left with the educators of the next generation of physical therapists are people that have been in a bunch of school and doing a bunch of research, but we're losing the people that are actually in the clinic. And, talking to people that I work with who explicitly haven't been in the clinic for a very long time, they very much value greener educators or adjunct faculty, etc., who are like, they were in the clinic, they were in the hospital yesterday, they're coming to teach the students today. They rely on them in a way to have this really up-to-date, fresh knowledge and experience. And again, they don't count.
There'll be arguments. Well, they count. That's why it's a balance. That's why it's a mix. But it's really not, right? It's really, you could have a complete faculty of people without a terminal degree, and it would be okay, right? People could get research funding. People could have collaborations. People could be as skilled educators as possible. I've been part of hiring teams that have looked at the spectrum of faculty that you're hiring and just pushed aside people without a terminal degree who were fantastic and took instead someone who was horrible who had a terminal degree. I've had that happen.
Think about, at USC, the like big clinical management courses, and how they how we have, a director, and then we have maybe 8 people that are managing different little lab groups. And I want those 8 people to be people that were in the clinic recently. I mean, it doesn't have to be all of them because I'm not one of them, and I want to be one of them, one of the people leading one of those groups. But yeah, this like 1-to-8 ratio would, I think, be absolutely reasonable. If you're going to have a ratio, 50% is just, it doesn't make sense given the profession.
Yeah,
it really hits home for me because that's part of the reason why I went back to school, is that I knew I wanted to stay in academia and I wanted to be competitive. And so I said, okay, I'm going to suck it up and I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to get a terminal degree so that I have a little bit more mobility moving forward. But the whole point of the CAPTE faculty qualifications section is that you're showing how you are disseminating scholarly work, right? And that you are showing that you are doing all 3 legs of the stool, right? Like that's the whole point of that section. So it does feel like...
Which is identical section for people with a terminal degree. Yeah. Yeah, it's very quite honestly offensive to me.
I'm glad you brought that paper up, Eric.
Yeah. I really want everybody to read it. We'll link to it in the show notes. We'll get some more like eyes on that paper because I think there's some energy around that. So, all right. So we're feeling a little bit of ennui. I've gotten everybody revved up. I think we need to turn the ship a little bit before we get too much into the vortex. Which I mean, frankly, I'm not sure it's possible, but no, I think it's really about the opportunity, right? And I know that's why we're talking about all this stuff, and that's why we're getting revved up about it, is because we passionately want to take action that will help avoid disaster in the education wing of our profession. And it's been going one way for a really long time. And so I'm back to that time where it's a moment. And I think we need to have more urgent conversation about this. And so, what I hope that people listen to this podcast feel is the passion and the discussion around pain points that will have the potential for innovation and positive improvement afterwards.
Well said, Eric. I feel like we're passionate because I love what I do. I love being a physical therapist and I love getting to educate the way that I do as a physical therapist. And I want, other people that come next to have the same opportunity as I did, right? Honestly, I want it to be easier for them. I want them to not be looking over their shoulder, struggling and feeling concerned about their student loans. I want them to just be able to find the joy and not have the career regret like we talked about. I want it to I want, and I want people to not feel burnt out. I want it to feel like it's something that works and is sustainable. And so I think there are lots of things to address and solve and talk about, but I think that's the first thing, talking about it openly and getting loud. That works. And we need to, I think, start having those conversations in lots of spaces, in conferences and podcasts like this, on forums. And, if you are listening and you are an APTA in the House of Delegates, pay attention. We want to bring this up, bring these things forward. That's what we need. We need
Pay attention
changes.
and share to all your friends.
Share, like, and share.
All the
Subscribe.
delegates. Yes.
All the things. But I feel like getting the message out and starting these conversations everywhere is what kind of needs to happen.
Yeah. Libby, any parting words for us?
No, I can't believe we're coming to the end of our fun trifecta of time together. It's been really nice to just talk about what we care about, and I think this particular group of people is very good at being authentic and just bringing forward the things they're actually thinking about and concerned about, and I've very much enjoyed doing that with all of you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for saying that. I feel like there's probably some opportunity for us to collaborate again because it has been a really good time. So good. We've been talking for a good while here. Let's wrap this up. So I just want to thank you both for being here. Make sure everybody who's listening, check out Trellis Ed, and Elise and Libby are doing some really cool things. Follow Brainsmith. Carly and I are doing some cool things. And, we hope to talk to you all again as a group. This is really fun. But until then, this was a really fulfilling and energizing episode of PT Outcast. Thank you very much.